voluntary basis without compensation. The purposes of the commission are to promote the educational, cultural, economic, and general welfare of the city through the preservation and protection of buildings, sites, structures, areas, and districts of historic significance and interest through the preservation and enhancement of local historic, architectural, archaeological, and aesthetic heritage found in this city, through the maintenance of the distinctive character of the city's historic districts, and through the promotion and enhancement of the city's historic and aesthetic attraction to tourists and visitors. Again, we would like to say good afternoon, and I'd like to give each other member of the commission opportunity to introduce him or herself. And this afternoon, I'll start from my right and the audience left.
Good evening. My name is Melissa Bailey.
Carol King.
James Long.
Michelle Browder.
We have an interesting agenda on tap for this afternoon, and I'd like to begin our meeting this afternoon by calling attention to our minutes of the last meeting, and the chair will now entertain a motion for the adoption of the minutes of the November meeting.
Dr. Bailey, I have a correction. Historic preservation, October 12th. Should it be November 9?
Okay, all right.
A date change, yeah.
Okay, all right. Anyone else?
I read them.
Anyone else? Okay. The chair will entertain a motion.
I move we accept the minutes with the correction.
I second.
It's been moved and properly second that we adopt the minutes of the November minutes with the correction. Is there any unreadiness? Any unreadiness? All those in favor, let it be known by a show of hands. Paula, motion carried. Thank you so very much. We have on our agenda as we continue this meeting our sign presentation, and I would like to ask Mr. Joey Brackner to come up as a representative of Cottage Hill to receive the sign presentation for Cottage Hill.
Mike, would you go to the next page? Next page.
Mr. Brackner, on behalf of the Montgomery Historic Preservation Commission, it is indeed an honor to present this sign to you as a representative of Cottage Hill.
Thank you very much.
Would you like to say a few words?
Well, just on behalf of Carolyn and Julian, as a neighborhood, we are very proud of their efforts in the restoration of their house on Clayton, and also with being recognized by the city for that. And I accept this happily on their behalf. Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it very much. Do we have anyone here this afternoon from the Trinity Church? Anyone? Thank you. I'd like to call attention to the next part of our agenda, the MAPCO update and discussion. Has each one of our commissioners had the opportunity to look at that MAPCO installment in our package for this afternoon? Christian, did you have any comments you'd like to start us off with?
Where to begin? So you all have just a selection of the submission. If anyone's interested, the full submission is available online under the Architectural Review Board on the city calendar. You got the highlights, you got a site plan and some the cut through, and then some 3D renderings of the building and what they think the building will look like in context, I think. Yes.
Okay. As we proceed, I believe we have some persons here in the audience this afternoon who want to address this issue. If we do, if you'll step to the microphone and identify yourself, we'll give you a couple of minutes to say whatever it is on your heart regarding MAPCO and Cottage Hill.
And I would add that we have been discussing this with representatives from MAPCO for about 6 months now, and we have made suggestions that could make this a better fit for the neighborhood, and on the whole, they have declined to incorporate those suggestions into their proposal. We did learn today that there may be some significant traffic issues with the site plan as they have presented it from a traffic engineering standpoint. So if some of those issues play out, then this site plan won't work at all, and we'll just have to see where that goes.
Okay. Mr. Brackner, would you give us your perspective?
Sure. I'm Joey Brackner. I serve as president of Cottage Hill Foundation. We have a couple of, at least one board member, our treasurer in the audience. We oppose the plan that MAPCO has come up with. I have actually been in one meeting and have, I think, maybe emailed once with MAPCO myself. We have several issues with this. One is that it the pumps face out. The pumps become basically a gateway to our neighborhood, which in turn is a gateway to the city of Montgomery, a gateway to the oldest neighborhood in the city. We also have an issue with the excavation into the hill. That hill is in fact Cottage Hill, where the Cottage Hill School, which gives our neighborhood its name, was once located. And there is a business up there. You can see the parking lot there. It would cut all the way really to that business. That's a massive movement of earth there. It'll completely, it's just, you know, the effect to the landscape is going to be dramatic, even with whatever trees and shrubbery they use to try to hide that. So those are our really biggest issues, in that right across the street to the right in this image was a gas station that was put there in the 70s. It's been gone for almost a decade, maybe more than a decade. You know, I know that this is a nicer looking gas station than that one once was. This is not going to be a long-term asset, I'm afraid, to our community, certainly not as proposed. We fought that Gulf station that was once on that empty lot. We got them to at least adjust their design so that it did not take away as much to our neighborhood. But as you see, it's a paved over scar. A 20-year commitment that MAPCO has proposed is, you know, I have a 36-year and counting commitment to my neighborhood. That's nothing to, you know, a 200-year-old neighborhood. So, you know, we also feel like perhaps the most important point for us in our sister neighborhoods is the precedent of their two attempts to get around existing regulation for this plan. One is the regulation for historic neighborhoods, but the other is they will attempt to get a rezoning. We oppose both efforts, and we will be at both hearings in opposition.
Before you take your seat, is there any question or comment from the body that you'd like to address to him?
Well, I was just gonna ask, and Christy may know this too, there's no, the signage issue has not been addressed at all in this, has it?
They have not submitted any specs on any signage.
That's another battle on top of everything else. Yeah.
And I also noted in my ARB comments that they do not address lighting. There's no lighting plan, because even when folks have asked for parking, and there have been a couple, they've not been completed, but there have been a couple of parking proposals in Cottage Hill. The board has not been concerned necessarily with the appearance of it, but the effect that it has on the residential properties, that it needs to be directed down and away from residences. And this is intended to be a 24/7 operation.
Any other comments? Yes.
So is the objection related to appearance, or is it related to neighborhoods, or both?
Well,
That's what I'm trying to.
the board is not unanimously opposed to a gas station necessarily, but we are opposed to this design of a gas station. There is an historic property on site now, and apparently there was no serious attempt to consider using those historic structures in a design, which would be our preference. But even with a demolition and rebuild, we feel like they can do a lot better than this by situating their market in a way that would be more traditional in the 19th century, which would be along the streetway there, instead of set back and the pumps being in front of it. That would be a modification that would improve, in my opinion, this design greatly. There is also, I feel like, a pedestrian safety issue, and Christy alluded to the traffic, but listen, those of us who live in this neighborhood know that that intersection of Heron and Holt is a mess, because Holt is one way, and Heron turns right there as you're coming up the entrance ramp. People think they're taking a right on red, when in fact they're running that red light. And you see it. If you've gone that way, you have seen people do that. And that's going to happen, except this time they're going to run that light thinking that they're taking a right on red, and then take a left into that filling station. I mean, it's going to be a mess. We have, because we're across the street from another filling station food market, a fairly big homeless transient population. You know, there's a lot of pedestrian traffic. We have folks in the neighboring neighborhoods who may not have a vehicle, who go to these food markets just for a loaf of bread. There's a fair amount of pedestrian traffic in this area, so that's another concern. But our primary one is both for the neighborhood, and not so much that the kind of business it is.
So the guidelines for new construction consider, some of the factors that are considered to determine whether or not the new construction is appropriate is, we've got design and materials, so kind of the architectural things, but how it relates to the street, how it compares to other historic properties. This one doesn't really have anything other than the existing building to conform to, but we know what the traditional commercial form looks like, and that is pedestrian access at the sidewalk. And the smart code also, if they stayed in form-based zoning, called for the pumps to be behind. So you would have a pedestrian front at the sidewalk, do your business in the back, and so that at least the frontage addressing the street toward the neighborhood would be more, even if the design's not traditional, the siting of the building is more traditional, so it does have that more pedestrian component. And they have determined that their way of addressing the pedestrian component is to slide the building endwise down toward Heron Street.
Which is
So-
what this shows.
Which is
right?
what that shows. So that is not, there is an entrance on that elevation, but it is not the primary facade. So the focal point of this is still the gas pumps out front.
Any other question, comment?
Well, I would just, the butchering of the hill, I mean, I think this is their drawing is a very weak, looks like a nice little slope here with some nice evergreens at that, but that is a drastic hill. That drops really quickly, so I don't know how, that they could address that. I mean, this is a very weak.
Let me ask you, any other comment, questions? Let me ask you this one question. Has there been any discussion, any dialogue, in fact, between the residents of Cottage Hill and MAPCO officials?
Elliot Oakes and I were in a meeting.
Jake was there.
Jake was in that meeting. Jake Johnson, another neighbor, was in that meeting. I think those were the only neighborhood representatives. So yes, there has been some.
Okay. Is there anyone here tonight who has actually spoken to a MAPCO official who would like to come to the microphone and abreast us of how that dialogue went?
I know I've had several conversations where I've been told by various representatives that they needed to reach back out to the neighborhood and didn't. So,
Elliot, have you had any communication with MAPCO that you want to? Not really? Okay. So he's the only one, other than myself, from the neighborhood who's actually, to my knowledge, spoken directly to MAPCO.
Okay. All right. So what I can say that you telling this body tonight is that the neighborhood, the residents, are opposed to what we have in front of us.
The neighborhood is opposed. Some are opposed to any gas station whatsoever,
Really?
but others are opposed specifically to this plan. And that's what the board is addressing. We would probably there would be enough people in the neighborhood who might be okay with a better design, but no one wants this.
Okay. All right. Is there any other question or comment?
Okay. I think I have at least one other neighborhood member that wants to say something. Would that be okay?
Surely.
Jim, you want to say?
Sir, if you just tell us who you are and tell us how you feel.
Yes, sir. My name is Jim Upchurch. I live at 529 Martha Street in Cottage Hill with my wife, Tara Sartorius, who's here with me tonight. I'm a little bit of a latecomer to this discussion, so forgive me if I say anything that's not factually correct. I've had a chance to look at the documents that are readily available, and I do know a few things. And I was a member and the president of the Architectural Review Board a number of years ago when the world was young. I served on it with Sadie Penn and Jim Barganier and those folks back in the day. But I'm not really here as an ARB type representative at all. That's not my perspective. My perspective is strictly as a resident of Cottage Hill who's been living there for over 20 years now. And in particular, somebody who's had contact with gas stations in that part of town. Now, I realize the world needs gas stations. I'm not here to give you a speech about, emissions or anything like that. That's not my perspective. My perspective is that with respect to the gas station the Chevron station that's directly across the interstate from where this location is, the old gas station that's now a vacant concrete lot in that same neighborhood, the gas station that was an Exxon station, and I've actually forgotten what brand it is now, that's located on, Lawrence Street and South Street, that intersection across from the Central YMCA. The same problem comes up again and again, which is that you go to those places and that you are approached by people who want something from you. They use those places as a place to sustain themselves. I understand that they have to do that. They're in a position in life where they have to do it. But my wife and I decided the other night that what we were going to do, in order to be fair about this, was to get in our car and go to the existing MAPCO locations in Montgomery and see what they were like. You can't really tell anything from an elevation. I know that from, an architectural drawing. We wanted to see what they were like on the ground. And we drove to the first of these locations, and within 30 seconds of driving onto the lot, we encountered two derelicts pulling trash out of the trash receptacles at the MAPCO station. These locations, 724, brightly lit, attract that kind of traffic. The difference between that MAPCO location and the other MAPCO locations that we went to, and the one that's proposed, is that this is the first one that's on the edge of a residential neighborhood where people actually live. All the rest of those are strip center areas. Everything around them is the same kind of construction, the same kind of business. This is different. This is going to change the character of one of Montgomery's most significant neighborhoods. Maybe it'll be a big change, maybe it'll be a little change, but it's definitely going to be a change. It's going to attract traffic, 7 and 24. It's going to be visible from at least some of the structures that are part of the residential neighborhood of Cottage Hill. It's going to emit what I can only describe as an unearthly greenish fluorescent glow all night long, 7 nights a week, that's going to be visible from some of these houses in Cottage Hill. That's all fine if it's in the middle of a bunch of other similar businesses, as all these other MAPCO locations in Montgomery are. This is unique. This is not like those other places. And I think it's going to have a damaging effect on the neighborhood as it does business, not to mention what's going to happen 20 years from now, when, as I understand the facts, I may be wrong, there's a 20-year lease that's under proposal. When that lease runs out, the chance that this will become a location just like that other abandoned filling station location, concrete and nothing else, for as long as you want to stick around and wait for it to change, it's probably not going to, except it's going to be much bigger. So for all those reasons, this troubles me as a resident of Cottage Hill. Those are not architectural objections. They're real day-to-day living resident objections. This station's a problem.
Okay. Before you take your seat, question, comment. Question or comments?
I hear you loud and clear.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
And I think to his point, one of the things that I keep beating my head against the wall about with MAPCO is that we have diametrically opposed needs. For me, this is an edge, and preserving the edges of our districts are very important because that's how erosion of the district creeps in. There are a series of vacant lots on this stretch between here and the Capitol Inn that could be assembled and become a McDonald's if this works. Edges are extremely important. New development ideally is going to embrace the neighborhood and not embrace the interstate, which is what they want. We want the neighborhood. We want low visibility, inconspicuous. They want high visibility so people will come buy gas. And that's not saying that that's a bad thing. It's just saying that we have different needs. Edges are important, and I think that given the opportunity. We've certainly tried to hold an edge in the Garden District, which is why Laura Calloway is here this evening, where people have been interested in rezoning, jumping into the Garden District at Court Street and Fairview. And we have told them that Court Street's a hard line. You won't be able to get that rezoning. You won't be able to comply with the district regulations. And it's held so far because the edges are important. But I don't know if we'll be able to hold it moving forward if there's not consideration of that given here. I don't know that we'll have a leg to stand on without arbitrary and capricious decision making.
I can tell you, after practicing law for a pretty considerable period of time years ago, if you make a change like this, every day after that you're going to hear, but what about the MAPCO thing
Exactly.
that y'all approved? What about this? Why is my thing different from this? You'll hear it over and over and over again, and eventually you won't really have an argument to contradict it.
Okay.
It's a real problem.
And there's a distinction between development and good development. You know, that there are things they could do to this site plan that would tweak it, that would make it a better fit. May not be the perfect fit, but it would be a better fit. So it's not, I know, Joey, you said some folks are against gas stations, you know, entirely, but kind of the taking that absolutely not out of the equation takes the hysterical out of historic preservation, because it's not that you're saying under no circumstances will we stand for that. You're saying we want you to be a better neighbor. We want you to fit in with what's here, and if you can accommodate that, then we'd love to have you. And I think you stated that in your letter, that you would love for this to be a good infill example and be a good neighbor. And so when they resubmitted, this is essentially what they sent us in September when it was delayed, and the alteration here is that they extended a wall on the Heron Street frontage, so it looks like you have more building frontage at Heron Street.
It's right here in the back.
And now they've added a little low squiggle of a wall that says Historic Cottage Hill on it up at the corner, which I received today.
Okay, Ms. Upchurch,
Thank you, Dr.
thank you so much for taking time to come and speak to us this afternoon. To our other commissioners, now is our opportunity to express our sentiments regarding this project. Do we want to endorse it?
Dr. Bailey,
Yes.
would you allow Laura Calloway to say a few words from the Garden District perspective and just kind of the broader implications of,
Surely.
of why this has been
Sure.
certainly on her radar?
Good evening. I'm Laura Calloway. I'm the president of the Garden District Preservation Association, and I just wanted to come up tonight to let y'all know that our association supports the position of the Cottage Hill Association. We are also a historic neighborhood that is sort of downtown adjacent, and like Christy said, our edges are the thing that we are constantly after in order to preserve our neighborhood. I can't really add much to what Mr. Brackner and Mr. Upchurch have said, other than that if this goes through, it would not only be a very bad precedent for Cottage Hill and change the very nature of that neighborhood, but that it could then be used to want to make changes on our edges or even in the center of our neighborhood as well. So we would appreciate you considering our neighborhood as well as Cottage Hill when you make your decision.
Thank you for coming out. To our commissioners, is there anything that any of you would like to say before we take a position?
I wanted to hear from the community. I was one of those, because I wanted to get a better sense of where the community stand. I'm troubled that this project has had so little actual community involvement in the development of plans. And that BAPCO doesn't appear to be listening to what opposition or what comments have been made. A big organization like that shouldn't try to push this through if the community is concerned about it without further discussion. Also, in looking at the comments, I couldn't tell, Chris, that they actually even attempted to comply with the new construction guidelines. You talked about what they were, but I didn't see anything in there where they even attempted to comply with those guidelines.
I don't believe that they did. And they've been explained. We do know that they asked the president of the city council if he could see about carving them out of the historic district. And we told them that that legally could not happen. And then they haven't decided on their rezoning request. I explained to them that it doesn't matter what the underlying zoning is, that ARB will be looking for certain things, and then it's up to them to figure out how to make that work with zoning. They indicated they would be amenable to leaving it under smart code, but they'd still have to get the T4C because this location does not support gas station development.
Okay, anyone else? Everybody's made up his or her mind.
Well, can I just say something?
Yes, ma'am, please.
Because I kind of sympathize with Cottage Hill because we're not that far from, our establishment is not that far from them. And I take Heron Street going to the Mothers every day. And my only question to this is, how is it just a one, if you were to make that right on Heron Street, right? You make the right on Heron, does that drive traffic into downtown since it's a one-way? That's a one-way street coming out. Am I correct on that?
Heron and Clay are two-way,
They're
Holt
now
is the
two-way.
one-way, and then the streets are one-way over the interstate.
It stops
Got it.
at Hope.
Got it, okay. Well, I'm empathetic to Cottage Hill because it is a historical community.
Yes.
And so I honor that, and I just wanted to let them know that
All right.
I kind of,
Okay. You want to honor the historical integrity
Yes.
of the community.
absolutely.
All right. Anyone else? Now is the time. Okay, the chair, I'm sorry.
No.
Okay. The chair will now entertain, let's just say a motion to reject it. And if you like mine, you can just endorse that or not vote in favor of it. So,
Okay, one
yes,
more
ma'am.
question.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. Would you all be open to a different plan if they were to come back with something else, or is it just off the table all?
Would you come to the microphone?
I think the board would. I mean, I think what little I understand of regulations, if they came with a plan that was within historic district regulations, we really couldn't stop it. I mean, theoretically, or there would be less of, So if there's a way that they can do this and situate it in a way as a retail establishment would have been situated in the 19th century or even more recently than that, it would certainly make it a better plan. Now, there are people in the neighborhood who don't want a gas station at all. Jim might be one of those, yeah. There's several that don't want it at all. I'm speaking only from board discussions. And it might be that if we were called to make a statement on a future plan, they might show up and oppose that. I don't know. But that's what I was going to say. But I just, so you had a show of hands of people who are opposed to gas stations, period. Who are opposed to this plan? Yeah. And these are, I guess these are the only people from my neighborhood here. You're the, oh, yes, hello. You're back. Seasonal residents, but excellent neighbors. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, let me just add, that takes care of your question?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay, so we're going to assume that people just don't want it.
No, they don't want that for sure. And a good portion of my neighborhood doesn't want any gas station, but I don't think we can fight this, but if they come back with a plan that's sensitive to our neighborhood in terms of the guidance of the ARB, I don't know that we could stop it.
But
So that was the board's position.
But ideally, no gas station is what I'm hearing.
Most people, yeah.
Okay.
Well, a good portion of the longtime residents in the neighborhood don't want a gas station at all because of the lighting, the things that they haven't even brought up for good reason.
Okay.
You know.
Thank you. Thank you
And
very much.
and it's a very high-intensity use where having office space or retail space is not intended to just suck cars up off the interstate and spit them back out on the next ramp. So this is a very high-intensity use for this piece of property.
And we have new construction, state and business offices in our neighborhood who have complied with ARB regulations. They're good neighbors. They need to be a good neighbor.
Christian, let me ask you this. Must we vote tonight?
The meeting's tomorrow night.
We must vote tonight then.
If you want to take a position or express a statement or on behalf of the HPC, then yes, you
Okay.
need to. Now, do I think tomorrow will be the end-all, be-all of the discussion with MAPCO? No. It's a multi-layered project. For the board has to approve demolition of 2 historic structures. To consider that, they have to have what they would consider a suitable replacement plan, which means one that meets the guidelines, which this does not. So they could table it or deny it based on the demolition request because the plan's not suitable. They could delay demolition for 6 months. We've got tree removal and extensive excavation that's part of it that also has to be approved. And then we get to the new building. So tomorrow's not going to be the end of it because they're nowhere close to being compliant with anything. But if there is a sentiment that needs to be expressed tomorrow, will be the first opportunity to do so.
All right, thank you very much. Now, the chair will now entertain a motion from someone.
What are we motioning on exactly?
Whatever that person's sentiment is. In other
We
words,
don't want it.
Yeah.
Well, I would propose a motion that essentially would say that they'll move that the Historic Preservation Commission oppose the MAPCO plan for the gas station at Cottage Hill Historic District.
Yes,
Existing.
right. And see what we would do.
No, Carol's,
current-
did you hear Carol's point?
Current or existing, we can add that to
Existing
it.
plan.
Existing plan, yes,
Right.
she's saying existing plan. And see, what we would do, we would vote that yea or nay, up or down.
Do we oppose their current plan?
Existing
Right.
plan, yes.
Development.
Right. So someone needs to make a motion to
Okay,
state exactly that.
I move that the Historic Preservation Commission oppose the current MAPCO plan for a gas station in the Cottage Hill Historic District.
All right, any unreadiness?
Has to be a second.
Is there a second? I'm sorry. Is there a second?
I second.
All right. Any unreadness? All right. All those in favor of the motion as stated, please let it be known by a show of hands. Motion carried, Paul. Okay. Thank you very much. And Christian, thank you. And we'll be sitting tight to see what happens tomorrow.
We'll be on Facebook Live.
Okay.
Tune in.
It is live.
Okay. So it's live.
If you don't want to come and see it in person. And again, if anything happens based on my discussions this morning with them regarding traffic issues and whether or not they've spoken with AlDOT and they decide to delay again, just be looking for that. I will let everybody know I know to know and ask that you share that with anybody else you may have shared this information with as well.
Christy, are you saying that they have done a traffic study or will?
We don't think they have. We have now. We know that they know about the traffic count. There were some concerns.
So there's an estimated traffic count?
But they haven't looked at traffic flow. There are some issues from a traffic engineering standpoint that are problematic.
Just out of curiosity, how many vehicles are they estimating?
I don't know.
That would be useful to know, because as a point of comparison, let's just say it was, would we be talking thousands per day? I have no idea. Like, what's the ballpark?
Oh yeah, this is the main feeder in and out.
So
to
thousands
downtown.
of cars per day.
Yeah.
So that would be the equivalent of like thousands of cars going through, what's the neighborhood over there off of Vaughan Road, right across from Publix? Halcyon. That'd be like thousands of cars going through Halcyon a day, is essentially what we're saying.
Yeah.
So like if you just put a gas station in the middle of Halcyon and then you had thousands of cars just going through okay.
Yeah, so the issue that traffic engineering brought up was that they thought the entrances on Heron and Clay, so it's going to be the ones on your left and right of this view, need to be pushed further away from the corner, which would disrupt their site plan. And they also didn't know if AlDOT would allow them to access this property at Holt Street because of the traffic flow, because it's under AlDOT's control, because you've got the on-ramp, off-ramp circulation there. And it is up to them whether or not they would be permitted access.
Carol, you said it's like a service road?
Well, it is a service
Well,
road.
yeah.
It's the eastern service road.
Yeah.
Like Dickerson's the western service road. It just happened to be existing. They didn't build it when the interstate was there, but yeah, it's the service road.
I left a message for the engineer this morning, and I did not hear back from him.
Okay. Good enough. Thank you all. Other business annual plan discussion.
So I think I put, did I re-put the street strategy on a page in your packet? You should have gotten something for CAMP, which is the National Alliance of Preservation Commission's training program. And we can apply for grant funds to do this. And they have a couple of so right now they still have a virtual option. They're hoping to be able to offer an in-person option later this spring, or sometime after late spring. So this is something that I would like you all to say, we're going to do this. And I've contacted Prattville and the planner in Prattville. He said they did one virtually, but he had some members who missed it. So I would certainly open it up regionally, because we do have some communities within our reach that would probably benefit from this as well. So it would be a matter of selecting, look, design review. Envisioning infill design is course 1 on the sheet. If only we had a short course on that before tonight. So there are things that we can select from, or it's kind of the standard offerings. I've been to a couple of camps, and they always have really good and well-versed speakers. I think because of where we are, we've had preservation law attorney that teaches at University of Georgia, and someone from Nashville, and trying to think of who else presented. But it's always a very well done. And if any of you have seen any of the online offerings that NAPC has done, that's kind of the caliber of what's presented in a workshop setting.
They're really good. This one last week about mid-century modern and all the new names they're giving to new architecture.
I learned names for a whole lot of
Fabulous.
architecture that I think is really, really ugly,
Yep.
is what
Yep.
I learned.
They call it that too. And they're really interesting. They sent the link, the follow-up link we could blast out too, so people could look back through it too.
So moving forward, if we pursue this, I need to get something approved by city council so we can apply for the funds. But then we'd also need to start looking at times. I know we've got several folks who teach, so probably not during it, maybe, I don't know, if summer's better, weekends are better. I know football season's bad.
Summer would be ideal.
Summer, okay. So
Comments?
It's a good idea.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Okay, so I'll look into that. We may try to squeeze in a little bit of funding for the Western Rail. I talked to Martin about what he would charge us to use the Capri. Lois Cortell has had the Office of Archaeological Research. Jeremiah Stager has done a 3D model of the Western Rail Yard as it was, not as it is, and has done a kind of a 30-minute film that takes you through each piece of it. And we had some discussion yesterday about doing a public presentation for that at the Capri, and bringing in some other speakers and other discussion. A fairly like a 1-hour type program, but still something that's very public that you can make a big to-do about that isn't in City Hall. So.
Comments? Anyone? All right. Christy, I think this plan looks real good. And it's obvious that someone put a lot of effort in compiling this information, getting it to us, so we can see what is involved. And I hope that everybody has already committed him or herself to doing X, Y, Z to make it work, because we're going to need some people to really thumb down and do some work. It can't become a success on its own. So you've had a chance to read it, and Christy has done her part. Now we need to commit ourselves to doing our part. And that's where we are tonight. Thank you so much, Christy, for that. Any comment regarding the plan? Okay, thank you very much, Christy, and we'll look forward to hearing the posture of the city council.
Okay.
All right, thank you. Anybody else has anything you want to say before we leave this afternoon? I think we've had a very productive meeting. Anyone has any comment? Anyone has any kind of event coming up you'd like to share with us?
I did want to make a
Yes,
comment.
ma'am.
When the first day, I think the first day that I came, you mentioned bringing in people to have conversation about the history, but in order to preserve it. So I was hoping that we could revisit that maybe sometime in the future.
Sure.
Especially like around February and/or March.
Yes.
For Women's History and Black History Month. Just the history of Montgomery and, some of the buildings that used to be around. And I was going to talk to Sarah Beebe Buller, who has the MAP program, where they already have it over at the Crest, but they can come here and set it up, and people can record their stories during the time that we're here, or if there's some other way. But I would really like to see if we could do something special around February and March.
Right. Thank you for that. I have noticed quite a few people in Montgomery have memories and documents and other kind of artifacts and don't have a clue as to what to do with those documents on artifacts. And
Well,
I'm
good thing
frequently-
you have the
that's right.
Montgomery County Archivist on the board.
right, that's what we were saying. People need to know where to carry
Michelle, I think you and I
documents.
need to have a conversation after the meeting, just a brief one, because I know that, I don't want to speak for him, but Judge J.C. Love has been very supportive of community history endeavors. So
Yes.
let's maybe have a brief discussion
Surely.
after the meeting.
Surely. And I would like to ask him to come and stop by sometime. But the point of the matter is what you're saying more directly. It is amazing how many people in Montgomery, city and county, who have wonderful stories and don't get the opportunity to share those stories.
Well, Commissioner Bailey, you know, Christie has been involved, among others, in a number of oral history projects over the years since I've been in town. And so certainly, I'm not dragging Christie into a project she doesn't want to be on, but my point is that there is an infrastructure in place to do these sort of community oral history projects. We've done them in Madison Park, Centennial Hill, Pentlala. So
We've just applied for a National Park Service grant
Right.
that will do some of that in West Montgomery as well.
and Newtown as well. So my point is, you know, we're talking about February. Now that's getting pretty close for a big project, really close actually. But certainly there's an infrastructure in place for some sort of oral history project. You know, if other people have the motivation to do it. So something
Yes.
to think about.
Yes. And even if we can't do it in February, for those persons who just have a story to tell, we just want to have an open door policy, if you get my drift. And not pigeonhole a person that you have to come in.
Oh, no, I think you need some
certain time. No, no.
structure. You need a theme or something. No, not just anything, because you will just get anything. I mean,
No.
you need to have, even if it's a loose structure,
Sure. Oh, yes, definitely.
a structure of some sort.
Definitely. Well, see, those persons will be contacting Christy Anderson.
You want some pigeonholing. Not a lot,
Yes.
but a little bit.
Yeah.
Because otherwise somebody will be talking about the time that their lawn ornament was stolen or something. I mean,
You're right. You're right. No, they will have to call Christy Anderson and get on the agenda. So they just won't walk in here and get the opportunity.
but no, I think that's something that, you know, Michelle, if that's something you're
Surely.
interested in, maybe we can sit down and flesh something out maybe.
Yes. In other words, we want to let people know if you have an interesting story to tell, we will provide a forum for you saying something for a couple of minutes regarding that interesting story. Those persons who have been led to believe there's no outlet for sharing those stories. That's what we're really saying, not just anybody who remembers a story of something that person did in childhood that only has significance for that individual.
Well, just like Cottage Hill was just here.
Yes.
Like, what's the story about that? From what I understand, that was the first integrated.
It was the
Community?
first suburb outside of downtown, is its real claim to fame. You know, the first suburb built outside of the downtown core.
Yeah.
You know, it's the earliest.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But
But you know, when you talk about spatial I'm sorry. But when you talk about spatial segregation in the South, it's different than the North. I mean, you know, at least until the mid-20th century, you know, up North you see a hard segregation that's perpetuated by redlining and so forth, which happens in the South in the mid-20th century too. But prior to that, Southern communities are really different because, you know, you have the back of the house where the help lives. And so in Southern communities, you actually see, in many cases, whites and African Americans living in close proximity until the mid-20th century. So when you use terms like integrated in the South, you have to also have the context of what time frame you're talking about. Is integration simply living in proximity to each other, or is it more? And that's an essential question that you have to answer as you begin to talk about what is integrated housing.
yeah. Well, from what I understand, I was talking to some people that live in Cottage Hill, and they tout themselves as being one of the first communities to have black people that actually lived in the community during that time.
And so when you have claims like that, that's really interesting. And you know, you need to, if you can cross-reference it, if there's another, you know, oral history is a legitimate primary source for sure. Without oral histories, we wouldn't have a lot of our history. And that's how certain communities do keep their histories orally. But, you know, a claim like that, I think you would want to substantiate it with at least one other source, right?
Okay, all right. The point of the matter is, when I gave tours of Cottage Hill, I gave the name of the black families who live next door to white families. And the last tour I gave of Cottage Hill, I actually quoted the white pastor of that congregation and what he said in inviting black neighbors to come to that church, that white church in Cottage Hill. So you had more than one black family
That's what.
that actually lived in Cottage Hill. We're talking about the 1890s in Cottage Hill.
Yeah.
And the person who owned that tour that day was just amazed that in Montgomery, Alabama, in the 1890s, you had an integrated neighborhood. And that goes against the stereotype of what Montgomery stood for and what the South stood for. But we had it right here in Cottage Hill. And as I said before, I gave the name of those families that lived in Cottage Hill adjacent to whites. So,
They must have been on your tour because they were telling me that.
right, they probably were. But those persons were really amazed at what we had right here in Montgomery, Alabama. And I never heard of any kind of incident regarding the presence of those black families in Cottage Hill. Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay? Anything else? There be no further business. This meeting.